Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Average Superstar TV. I'm your host, Lauren Lepre. Please give us that subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio. A new episode drops every Monday morning at 5 a.m. And this week, we are back into the music world. For someone I've known a very long time here, we're jumping back into the hardcore scene, the New York hardcore scene, and I met this guy back in 1995, probably the spring of 1995. With that, Mark from Shutdown, welcome to Average Superstar TV.
What's up, Lauren? Great to see you, man. Been a long time, man. I appreciate you having me on. This is pretty cool for us to do this all these years later, man. Life really comes full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look at dude, and you wore like the best shirt.
Oh, it's one of my favorite shirts. It's funny, I didn't even think of it like for this specific podcast, but when I was a kid, everybody loved Hulk Hogan, and I was kind of like the Antichrist. I loved Ultimate Warrior. So like WrestleMania, when Ultimate Warrior beat Hogan, that was like the greatest day of my childhood. Like that.
I didn't think it could happen, but I was with you cheering because I was the guy up front that was always into the. I was over the good guys quickly. I was a Four Horsemen fan, and stuff like that. But I just thought the Warrior was going to be another guy he dropped the leg on and got another victory. So when that happened, I was so freaking happy.
Yeah, it's funny because I was at. I always tell my kids this story. I was at like I think it was one of my best friends. It was like his 13th birthday, and I remember because birthday is always in April, and his parents had a WrestleMania party. And it was like everybody, you had to wear a Ultimate Warrior or a Hogan shirt. And when I tell you, like 98% of the kids at the party had Hogan shirts on, and I came in my Ultimate Warrior shirt, and I was just like king of the world that day. I was like, and he was an Ultimate Warrior fan too.
Yeah.
And it was pretty cool. But yeah, just to be fair, my four brothers, two specifically, John and Kevin, are way, way, way into wrestling. I'm kind of barely scratching the surface. They're like wrestling gurus. Both of them have podcasts dedicated to wrestling.
Wow. Yeah. And when you met me, I was helping out with the ECW era and stuff. So yeah, I was kind of like my
I remember
the 90s, and then it just went flatline, like it's no more. Like I don't know. I guess when I put something behind me, it's over. But that was something I obviously let happen once the ECW and WCW folded. Doors were very hard for more of a wrestling male manager to get in with all the divas going on. I'm like, yeah, they ain't taking me.
Yeah. It's just like bad timing.
Yeah, it was. It was just the nature of the business, But Mark, when I got into hardcore was spring of 1993. What's your earliest memory and what drew you to the New York hardcore scene?
My earliest memory, I've said this a bunch of times before, is my first show. To get into New York hardcore, my first show was July of 93 at L'Amour's, and my brother's band Confusion played, and I was 13, and Madball played, and 25 to Life played, and Crown of Thorns played, and it was like that was a very sketchy crowd, to say the least. I mean, there was like a clash of a couple of crews at that show that I won't get into, but my brothers were nervous for me to be there for sure. And when I was outside, I started meeting, skinheads and punks and hardcore straight edge kids and, kids from my high school. And it was really cool. Like it was a really great, I was going into high school that summer, like that fall. And it was a really cool experience for me. And when I got in, they had to sneak me in because it was 16 and older to get into L'Amour's, and they snuck me in. They put a little bandana around me to make me look kind of like tough, which I was like 5 foot nothing. There was nothing tough about me, but they wanted to just like camo me into the crowd. Yeah. And then during Confusion set, they kept me on the side of the stage. And of course, like 2 songs into the set, everybody's looking at me. They're like, go stage dive, you know? And I'm just like a little kid. And they're just like, of course, you know, I'm listening to everybody, and I run and I stage dive into the crowd. And I feel like that was the moment that I like fell in love with hardcore, you know, like it was like literally like love at first sight. I was like, oh my God, I love this music.
Wow.
And I wanted to start a band that fall when I went into high school. The very first thing I did was find a kid named Rob who skateboarded, and we started a Suicidal Tendencies cover band. And
what a great start.
Dude, I never even talked about that. We did a couple
the first band I saw was right before my first hardcore show, and it was Suicidal Tendencies, the first band.
They were like,
yeah. So, and that was right at the Lights Camera Revolution. So, like, I got like a double dose of 2 amazing worlds pretty fast.
That's exactly what I was getting at. So I don't know why I gravitated to them when I was super young, like maybe even 9, 10. My brothers, because we all shared a room. So we grew up in Brooklyn, you know, and we had a pretty small apartment. It was like one of those Brooklyn old, like 3-floor houses, but we rented the top 2 floors. And like the top floor was kind of like an attic. It wasn't really like technically a bedroom, but my parents turned it into a bedroom and put 4 of us in there. And we lived like right next to each other, like daily. So on the walls, as you remember in the 80s, and by the way, this is my kids' room. They're cool walls, but on the walls back then was hardcore posters from my brothers, like posters of Underdog and Youth of Today and Agnostic Front and Cro-Mags. And I didn't know what the hell these things were. Like I was 8, 9, 10 years old, but you know, like you go to bed every night and like you see a picture and like you can't forget it, right?
You're drawn to something. You almost feel like you're missing out. So you want to be a part of what's going on, or at least check it out and see if you are.
Basically. So like I started going through their records when they would go to Sunday matinees, like in the late 80s, like they were never home. And they were 2 years, my brothers are like 2 years apart. So like Mike, I think was like 15, John was 17. And it was just like, they were off to the races with New York hardcore. They were never home. They were always at shows, always, you know, road tripping to shows. My parents were cool. They let them go, but I was at home alone and I would be in the room. And I'm 7 years younger than Mike, who's the next youngest after me. So I'm quite, you know, younger than them. And I'm like 8 years old. And I'm now like scratching their records, putting them on. Like, what is this? Suicidal? Why would they call their band Suicidal? In my brain, I'm like 8, 9 years old. And then I put the song on, you know, I saw your mommy's dead. You know, I killed your mommy's dead. And I'm like, I really am into this, you know? And then I start hearing like Institutionalized, and I was like, oh my God, I love this band. And I just started getting into them, and they were one of the first bands. So when I started high school, before I started a hardcore band, I met like a kid in a class, and he skated, and I was like, hey, do you play an instrument? He's like, yeah, I play guitar. I was like, cool, man, let's do a Suicidal cover band. And we never got off the ground. We learned like 4 songs, but we practiced probably like, you know, a dozen times, and it was super fun. And from there, I was just like, I have to start a hardcore band. And that's kind of how I started Shutdown. Like the next year when I was a sophomore was kind of when I found other guys. And, you know, Anthony was, if you remember, Anthony was one of the original guys that started the band with me. And then Steve and Jimmy came shortly thereafter. And then, of course, Dion replaced Anthony a little bit after that.
Got you. So, I mean, where I was compared to where you were, I mean, New York was a booming. There was always bands breaking open. And I mean, you guys seem to have gotten your roots on the fast side, like, you know, because there's so many bands, especially up there, that could get lost in the shuffle or play a lot of shows and no one cares. So
yeah, man.
You guys, like, I don't know, was it the lineup? There were some good people help push that on top of you doing an output of music?
To be honest with you, I was doing it all myself.
But there you go.
I was doing it by just like kind of like old school marketing, right? Like just talking to everybody, making friends, giving away a lot of stuff. Like we used to make demos. I don't even know that we sold them. We like gave them out. We sold them for like $2. Mm-hmm. And I think that like, I think about that now, and it was very organic the way we got our name out. You know, I met people like you, and I met people like Richie from Crutch and Wisdom in Chains, and I met, you know, Joe and all these cool people like at a time in my life where I was literally like 15. And we were doing road trips to like, you know, Wilkes-Barre and Scranton and Moose.
That's exactly where I met you around then. I think I remember the exact spot too, dude. Like, cause like back then it was crazy because I was a little older getting into hardcore there. But like, I just, as soon as I got it, I was just more blown away of the youth movement of like, that kid's 14 and he's in a band. Like, really? That's happening? But that was like a common thing. That's one of the things that drew me to it, like so much. And I mean, you could tell up there, we only had really about 8 bands that was consistent. And what happened, you know, everyone from New York hardcore and around the wanted to play there because we were eating that up. We were eating that up.
And I mean, you had bands like Strength for a Reason, Crutch, Warped Weeble Wobbles back then. You know,
Feeble,
I'm sure Feeble. Oh my God, I can't forget Feeble. And then you could go to Wilkes-Barre and a band that was very influential on me in Wilkes-Barre, Buried Alive. I really got into it. I mean, not Buried Alive, excuse me.
Burial Ground.
Burial Ground. Thank you. Sorry, no Buried Alive.
Okay.
Burial Ground was awesome, man. And he was one of the singer from Burial Ground. I believe his name was Jamie.
Jamie White, yeah.
He passed away. I know I had heard that from some of the local guys, but he was one of the first friends I made in the hardcore scene in Pennsylvania. And I was literally just turning 15. And we traded demos. And I believe he invited me to play the Manus Green, which was my second Pennsylvania show, which was right after a CC show, if I'm not mistaken.
And I believe I was there, but I think
you were definitely at the CC show.
Definitely, but I also think Inhuman's first show ever was that Manus Green.
That's correct.
Yeah.
If you were at that show, that was Inhuman's first show ever. And it's funny because I got my brother on that show because I was friends with Jamie from Burial Ground. And I was excited because Burial Ground.
He literally lived like 2 minutes from there. That, you know what I mean? Like, so
that's crazy.
That was like the Burial Ground Extend Option like club.
Yes. Option was awesome. I love Steve. Yeah. Those guys were amazing.
They had control who was going on there and stuff. So that's why you didn't see Crutch and stuff like that there. But, you know,
I know, and back then I never even realized this, right? Like I'm making truth be told, Lauren, like back then we were friends with everybody. So like we play the Manus Green with Burial Ground and Option, but then I didn't realize, you know, you go to CC's and that's Crutch territory, you know, and it's like you get in there and it's like
there was like a divide, and I thought I was like neutral with everyone because like as soon as I was here, like this band didn't like this band, I'm like, well, I have no problem with either one of you, so I'm just stepping over here, like, you know, that's just kind of how I was, you know.
Always, man. I stayed away. I didn't even know, like you're telling me about it now. I probably never knew that. So it's like, it's funny, but PA was always cool to us. Like I have very fond memories of those times and those weekends and just always good shows, right? Like even the shows with like less people, you felt like there was more people there based on the way the kids reacted.
I remember H2O's one of their first shows they ever played was at CC's, and I'm trying to remember who, it might have been like one of the first 6 times Hatebreed was booked and didn't show up. So, and it took like 6 times for them to finally play. But H2O played, and I think there was 20 people there, and they showed up for that Hatebreed, and the Hatebreed didn't show, so they were the headliner. But we didn't care. Well, we cared if the Hatebreed didn't show up, but we still were like, we're going nuts for whoever's playing tonight. We don't care. You know, so
that's how it was at CC's. I mean, hardly any stage. That stage was what, like 12 inches off the ground, and it was like you were one with the crowd at CC's. And the thing about it is there was such a vibe at CC's. We were talking about this as a band because we're the same 4 guys for the last 25 years. There was such a vibe at CC's where like when you walked in, it was really cold outside and you could see in that fall weather, like as a guy from Brooklyn, like we got out of the van, we were excited. We got out of that van, but like there was like smoke coming out of our mouth from how cold it was in those woods. And then you walked into this place that really didn't look like a club. It looked like almost like you didn't know what it was. It looked like a 1-floor hall. What the hell was it? And you walk in and there's just kids front to back going, you know, in the front going ape shit and like going off for like local bands from out of town. And I remember there was a guy from New York. His name was Lenny. He played in a band called One Second Thought. Okay. And he tried to help us in the beginning. He got our demo out, and I believe that he's the one that put it in the hands of someone like Vince from CC's or something. And he's like, hey, yeah, book these guys. And I think Vince put us on one of those shows, which is, you know, old man Vince is how that all happened.
Yeah. And it's funny. Do you remember walking to the convenience store?
Yes, I do remember that.
Okay, so if you ever happen to be passing this area, that's where Vince is now. He bought that. He owns that.
Too funny. I remember the earmuffs where he used to wear like the earmuffs like to inside the club or whatever you call them. Like, you remember, to like block out the noise? Little did we know he was doing the right thing. We all have tinnitus now. Like, we're all like dying. I can't hear anymore. And like Vince is like the smart one.
Yeah, I would say I'm very sharp hearing too. I was even back then, I was always wearing earplugs. I was just one of them, like, I'm gonna do this for a long time. I better be protecting my ears. So if it's
Yeah.
coming in time, you know, I put it off for a while. But yeah, that's fun. And did you when you were there, do you have any? And he just passed, believe it or not, in his late 90s. But did you ever have Vince's dad stop you at the door like he was the
Of
biggest
course.
guy? Yeah, he didn't care who you were, what crew. He's probably a 65-year-old Italian man at that. He stood right in
Dude,
his
I
path.
remember it so well. When you just said that, I have images in my head of the old man at the door and his dad. It turned out to be his dad. And that's funny, man. That's really funny. We never talked about this. Like, I remember it. I've never spoken about this on any podcast because nobody really talks about CC specific, right? This is like more of like a PA driven podcast. I mean, not really, but kind of, right? Because of your roots.
At this moment, yeah.
And you know, it's funny to talk about this because I totally remember him. I have a great memory.
Yeah, or I might have said that backwards. I think maybe the mother died, and he might be able. I'll have to get the right information on that. But I just know both of them they made it to their 90s. But yeah, and I remember, brother. I also remember like you being at Q's and Quarters, and
Oh, that was a great place.
And West Scranton, and I remember like Excessive Force was playing, like Fury of 5, 25 to live VOD, and it was just. By the way, if you were to look at that lineup that day. That's like a Super Bowl hardcore lineup for $5 on a Sunday.
I remember that show so well, man. I'm so glad. Shout out to Fury of 5 for playing again. Like, I'm so happy to see those dudes back. Like, haven't seen Jay Fury in forever, and like seeing them rock the stage at This Is Hardcore, like that was pretty cool, dude. Like, I'm watching the videos and I feel like I get goosebumps because it's just we all put in the work back then, and you know, a lot of times now I feel some of the older bands. It's crazy to think of us as an older band. I'm still in my brain a younger band, but we're not a younger band anymore. And it's like some of the older bands get lost in the shuffle. I hate to say that, but and it's okay because I feel that there's so much good new hardcore out right now that it's okay to, you know, forget the past a little bit. But it's like there's a lot of bands that are now putting work in still. And if they didn't over the last 15, 20 years, they built families, they built careers, but they love what they do. Hardcore runs so deep in their veins. I could say this for myself and probably for the Fury guys and other bands too. Like, to be back on that stage and see them back on that stage, it's really cool to see, man. And that Q's and Quarter show was amazing. That VOD 25, that was such a good show. If I'm mistaken, John booked that show, right? I'm trying to remember.
John booked them all, yeah. And he was like only 16
John from
old, John Leonore.
And what was his band called?
RSB.
RSB. Thank you very much. So I think he
was only 16 at the time too. So, you know, he's booking everybody. I just loved every show. By the way, it was a Sunday. Like, they were only allowed to book there because I don't know what business. It might have been a James way upstairs, and they didn't want to hear the noise. So,
yeah.
But Sunday at 6:00, we're behind a building, so the cops don't even like go back and stuff now. Like and it was never have any problems, but it was awesome. I remember you were your band was asked to go on first, and you were worried like, is anybody going to go inside? And I remember you were wearing a backpack that was bigger than you. and you guys went up and boom, dude. Like, you might have had the biggest pop that in the end. Cause you know, sometimes
dude, I have that show on video. You know that? It's funny.
But a lot of the times when there's such a big crowd, the opening band sometimes gets the best response because everyone can't wait to let out that energy.
That show, man, you bring back such memories that I really haven't thought of in a long time. Like, I remember that show so well, dude. And like, yes, you're right. Like, the funny thing is, like, you say that, and I'm glad you said that, but like, we never complained to go on first, but we would always be paranoid about people not being there.
You were just scared, like, is anybody going to watch us?
So in the case of playing anywhere in Pennsylvania, I could say, the opposite always applied. Kids came in, and it's like you say, it was like an energy release that they was just like ready to go off. And Q's and Quarters, I remember specifically because we brought one of our friends, I believe Joe Sansone, a very good friend of Shutdowns, grew up with us, and he had like the nice video camera, and he was like the one guy that had a video camera, and we took him, and he would like took a video of that show. And I don't maybe have it on me, but I know someone in the band has it. That show was amazing. Like, it was a great show. Like, I remember like it was like a crazy pit, and that was like something for us to see at like 15, 16, and it really like pushed us. And I'm telling you, like we talked about, like PA became like a second home for us quick because every weekend it felt like we were somewhere playing out there.
Yeah, and I I knew we had, not trying to sound like a wise Yoda, I knew something special was happening. I didn't understand at that time that history was being made, though. I did not think that at all.
Likewise, likewise. But to think of the legacy of just all the friends and people that are still around all these years later, dude. I mean, we've lost some people, of course, and some people
Oh,
fell off, but like just for me and you to be talking and for us to be talking about, you know, all the people in the Wisdom and Chains guys and, you know, everybody from back then and Strength for a Reason and like I tell you, man, there and one of my best friends, like who I love so much, who's not in a band, but you know, N.Y.H.C,
yep.
like, you know, to this day like talk to him all the time. He's my boy, and it's like all these friendships I made, and it all started at that one show, dude. That I met you, the same show. And I remember the second I met you, I remember you had long hair. I remember thinking to myself, like, does this guy like hardcore? Is he a metalhead? Like, what is this guy's deal? And,
I remember,
and
I had a, I mean, listen, I mean, my hair back
you
then,
always wore the ski cap, though. I remember the ski cap.
yeah, my hair was like way longer back then, but like I knew going in what I was up against, you know, but like little by little you win everybody over. But I knew going to North Jersey shows, like New York hardcore shows, sometimes you were going to get that like, hey, I like your long hair. And I was just like, just let it go, you know. Just
So,
yeah.
so you know what it was for me? My brother Mike had long hair. I just said hardcore guys are really a lot of metalheads in disguise. You know what I mean? So it's like, and we all come from that, you know. So it's like, it was just funny. Like, you know, you're 15, everything's an impression on you. Especially for me when I was going to those shows, like everything was all about like, you know, meeting people. It blew my mind, you know, like it really opened my mind up to like music and just doing this and traveling and meeting people and writing music. It was just like crazy. That time in my life really changed me, you know.
I think it was an amazing time for all of us, no matter really where you came from, because the more people you meet, the more bands you know, the more clubs. Each club, like you just knew you were going to know 50 people, and then by the end of the night, you might have an extra 30 friends of people you just met. Like it was just, how could you not just be so drawn to keep going?
Of course, man. And when you're a kid, there's nothing better than just making friends that have all the things you have in common, right? So it's like people, you know, yes, I was straight edge and, you know, but I wasn't a straight edge kid that, you know, only accepted other straight edge kids. All my friends drank and partied, you know, didn't matter. It was just like a great time to just hang out and just enjoy the music together. You know what I mean? And it was just like such a cool vibe going to those shows on Friday and Saturday night, because you got to understand Sunday was New York's day. That was our matinee day. So like to go out to CC's on a Friday night or Wilkes-Barre on a Saturday night, and you bet your ass we were in New York at a matinee the next day. So it was such a great weekend, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's pretty crazy. And when you brought up N.Y.H.C, I always said, I know you played, I think, at least one of those shows, but
Oh yeah,
Nick and Laura Rebel Angel used to book Newfoundland Fire.
of
And
course.
I call it Exit 6. I always say that. That was Exit 6 off of 84, but
I remember it well.
I remember also that's when Candiria really broke into the scene, and they got that might have been one of their first shows they ever played was Newfoundland. And I just remember like people were at hardcore dance, but everybody was just stopping and staring at the drummer. We were just kind of like drawn, like holy shit, like what is this?
Ken is mind numbing. Like to be around Ken Shock is mind numbing. Like it literally, imagine we used to share a studio and practice at the same studio with them, Fastlane Studios. And we would like, let's say we had 9 p.m. rehearsal. We had the studio from 9 to 11. They had the same studio from 11 to 1. And we would stay and watch him. And it was like literally like watching like a magician on the drums. Like this guy is just the most gifted drummer I've ever seen in my life. And listening to him on those records is just, it's art, man. It's like this, he's incredible. He's beyond, and watching him like do it, and he's so humble and cool, you know. He's like literally, he actually worked at that studio, so he used to help us. And it's cool because I see him on Facebook and Instagram and still doing his thing, man. This guy's a really, really talented musician.
By far. And I always remember every time they play, the first 2 or 3 songs, we'd be like, he's amazing, blah, blah, blah. But by the 4th song, you were just kind of in a trance.
Yep.
Like you were just like, how is he doing this? And other
by the way, like they're all incredible, like Johnny LaMacchia, and it's like they're just like insane musicians. They blow your mind with that music.
Yeah, by far. That's unreal. So I mean, as far as when you're up in New York hardcore, and you're coming like a staple at that time. I mean, and you played fast in an era of chugga 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 breakdowns. Like what What was there a reason for that? That's
Yeah.
that's one of the things that drew me to your band, because I mean, if someone comes up and does chugga chugga now, I kind of walk away. I'm kind of sick of that. But you were doing it when it was kind of dead. You know, it was a little bit dead in the water, playing fast.
It definitely was part of what we wanted to do. I was very, very into bands like Judge and Gorilla Biscuits and Youth of Today, Side by Side, and you name it, like that. The Youth Crew movement, yeah. But we're Brooklyn kids,
Yeah.
and we do come from where we come from. You know, I grew up in Sheepshead Bay. The guys grew up in, Bensonhurst, and we can't deny our roots of Biohazard and bands like that. And so we wanted to incorporate something that influenced us from the heart, but at the same time to do the fast style. Because if you remember at that time, there were no newer bands doing fast.
No.
And when I say fast, I guess you could say like youth crew type music. But we wanted to blend it. So we always practiced, and we said, we don't want to be generic, and we don't want to write, the riff with the chorus and the next riff. And we want to kind of throw some parts in there that people are just like, wait, that doesn't belong there. So we would write songs where they sounded kind of Gorilla Biscuits influence, but then in the middle of the song, you had like a Madball type breakdown. And people were like, wait, that's kind of crazy. Like, I never really heard that type. Like, that's kind of cool that they're heavy, but they're fast. And, the singer kind of sounds like he's 15, but I don't know, like, it's different. And for some people it hit, and for others it didn't, but we put the work in. And I feel like, so for the ones that were apprehensive at first, at the very least, they started to respect us a little more. And, fortunately for us, it grew into more of what we had always wanted to do, which was kind of like take it to the next level and travel.
That's great. And also, I mean, it was like that before you and I got involved. But one of the things I loved about hardcore, and you could play something for someone who's not into the scene, and they'll be like, well, why that band sounds just like that band? But I also like, you could say like Murphy's Law, No Redeeming Social Value, like E-Town Concrete, Crutch, The Wisdom in Chains, and All Out War, and Blood for Blood, and Shutdown, and be like, well, no, this is all different categories of music. Like, nah, actually, we're all under one banner. And that's something I just know, that there was diverse bands. Like, if someone says, like, well, what's a hardcore band? I always say, for my definition, a band that's raised in the hardcore scene. Like, I don't like saying, well, it's a sound, but like, yeah, with a punk influence, and then we broke off to this, and what year is it? That's my definition. If you're raised in the hardcore scene, you're a hardcore band.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. That's fair game. Every band you just mentioned, like, I'm into all those bands. I mean, that was our era, right? And shout out to E-Town, because I see they're still doing their thing. I mean, seeing those shows are wild. And it's funny, we did so many shows with all those bands, and so many times. Like, I'll tell you, we played a show, we toured California for the first time, and E-Town toured California for the first time. We had no idea. We showed up to the same place in San Diego, and we're both there together at this show. And there's probably like 15 kids at that show. But we hung out with the E-Town guys, had the time of our life. It was a great time. And it was just so cool, like, man, like how that happens. And now I see all this stuff later. And of course, E-Town, blew the hell up shortly thereafter, right around that time. Yeah. But, seeing kids embrace them now and all this stuff, it's super cool, man. Blood for Blood, I know it's been a while, but, when we played East Coast Tsunami 10 years ago, and seeing them get back together and do East Coast Tsunami and being there, and just seeing the kids go nuts, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think the New York hardcore guys from the 90s, like, would you really think this was going to go where it's gone? Like, could you really have ever predicted that?
I'll tell you, I just saw video footage. Me and my brother Mike were talking about it. I just saw video footage of the Sound and Fury Fest in California last weekend. And my brother said this to me, and I think it's an accurate statement. It may go down as the greatest American hardcore show you've ever seen. And I urge anybody that watches this to go on YouTube after you watch this, hopefully, and, type in Sound and Fury Fest and type in the Mind Force set, and your mind will be blown. There are 5, 7, 8,000 kids going out of their minds, singing every single word, singing every single lyric to every band that's playing. And there isn't one older band on that whole festival. It's all newer bands, with the exception, of course, of Terror, who, kind of falls into every category at this point. They're just, they work so hard. I mean, they deserve everything they get.
They're,
So,
I call that like a universal band. Terror's
oh
like
yeah, no,
one of my
I
permanent-
absolutely love Terror. You know,
yeah.
they're me and my brother Mike talk a lot, and we always like to say like almost like they are, you know, they're the kings of the modern day hardcore scene. They really truly are. It's great to say that. You know, we have our best, you know, New York hardcore bands, of course, that will always say, you know, Sick of It All, Agnostic Front, Madball, Murphy's Law, but in this day and age, Terror are the kings, and respect to them. You know, they work their butts off, and you know, I've known Scott for a long time. Chris from Cruel Hand, I recently got to know last October. H2O and Cruel Hand and Shutdown did a couple of shows in a weekend together, and they're just really good guys. You know, Chris from Terror and Cruel Hand told me a story about how he was 12 years old. We played in Portsmouth, Maine, and he couldn't get into the show. His mom wouldn't let him come that night, so he watched our sound check, and he was like totally into it. And I thought that that was like the coolest story I had ever heard. And you know, he talked about it on stage, and it was like, you know, that's what hardcore is about, dude. You know, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Would you do you have any so when did you leave New York?
In terms of moving,
Yeah.
I moved from New York September 20th, 2001, 9 days after 9/11.
Wow. I guess
Yep.
that did that have anything to do with that, or is that already planned?
Kind of crazy story. We stopped touring in August of 2001. Last thing we did was a little stint on the Warped Tour, like the last week. And that was the last touring that Shutdown did as a band. And it was a very crazy summer. We went to Europe. We went to earlier in the year, we did Japan, Australia, New Zealand. I mean, it was a nonstop year, kind of ran us into the ground a little bit, no time off. In the end of the day, I talked about this, like kind of burned us out a little bit in the sense that we were very young, you know, 22. We loved traveling, we loved playing, but we weren't, you know, making any money. We were just doing it, you know, people thought we were making, well, we couldn't even pay for our rent, you know?
Mhm.
So we tried our best to hang in there. The guys wound up going back to college, but I moved to Florida in September of 2001. I had a going away party. My parents, my dad lived in that same place I grew up in. My mom and dad had split up at that time. So it was just my dad and my brother living there, Mike. And my dad let me have a going away party there. And I basically invited like all of Brooklyn. And, you know, all my friends showed up. There was a lot of like, you know, people smoking weed on my porch and drinking beers and doing things they shouldn't do. And my dad was just like, hey, he's moving. He's 20 to 21. Let him go. You know, God bless. Good luck. And at that party, I moved. I got a car and drove down to Florida and lived with my grandparents for a couple months. And they lived close to the beach and just used to kind of hang out on the beach and kind of be bored and kept trying to convince the guys, you know, drop out of college, let's go back on the road. But I stayed in Florida and have been here ever since, man. And now you know, here we are in 2022. I just have my fourth child and have two boys, 15 and 13, and a little girl who's 8. And you know, this is my life down here. I can say I'll probably never, you know, move back up north. I do, you know, I love it down here. I truly do. But I do miss my friends and, you know, the good times up there.
Yeah, I just always like to get people's like when they leave an area. Like even when I left you know, the Scranton Wilkes-Barre area. I mean, that was an amazing era of my life to move to Philly. And yeah, it's only 2-hour drive, but I wasn't really going back up there that often for shows. I always just like to hear people's stories of when they moved on, or you know, because I mean, it's a hard thing to do. I mean, is there really where you're at in Florida? Is there real shows like of that magnitude? Or
So I'm in Broward County, you know, Fort Lauderdale area. I actually live in Margate, close to Coral Springs. And there is a place called O'Malley's. There was a show a month ago, and this is a very interesting story relevant to this podcast. There's a new band here called Body Blow. They're, you know, guys in their 20s from Miami. They're really dope, and they cover Hope by Shutdown. And
wow.
they got in touch with me on Instagram and made friends with me and invited me to go to the show and get on stage and sing Hope with them.
That's freaking amazing.
So I went to this show, which happened to be 1.3 miles from my home. I had no idea. And walking distance, mind you. But I drove. And I proceed to walk into this club that is packed with, you know, teenagers, kids in their early 20s, and a band called Children of the Flesh, which is more of like a metalcore band, but it was their show. And they invited Body Blow to play. So it wasn't really a hardcore show per se, but Body Blow was playing. And when I tell you, Lauren, I mean, it was like old times, but there was a couple hundred kids there going apeshit. and it was amazing. And it was like, wow. And, you know, the guy brought me up on stage and it was really funny. Kind of made me feel old, but it was really funny for him to do this. He's like, you know, I'd like to introduce you guys to a big influence on us. And, you know, we love this band, and to be able to bring him on stage and have him, you know, sing this song, it's really unbelievable for us. He wrote this song when he was 16, and he's coming to, you know, get up on stage and sing it now. And he said this, you know, so I get up and I sing it, and, you know, kids didn't know the words, but they were going nuts. And after the show, all these kids came up to me and they're like, "You really wrote that song when you were 16?" I said, "No, I wrote that song when I was 14." And they were laughing. And it was a really cool moment, a really cool moment. Miami lost one of its best clubs down here. It's called Churchill's, basically the CBGBs of Miami. They stopped doing shows when the pandemic hit. I saw Madball play there February of 2020. Pandemic hit the month later, and they haven't done shows since. And so there was another place called Rosas, and they closed down. So there isn't too many places, but I can tell you this: Broward County has a very, very good hardcore scene, and there's a lot of new bands, and Miami has a great hardcore scene too. Shout out to Body Blow. Those are my boys. But you can check them out on Instagram. They're really, really cool band. They cover District 9, and they cover Crown of Thorns. So very much our style of the music, Lauren.
That's great.
They're really cool kids, man. They're really cool kids. And I'm 20 years older than them, and it makes me feel so effing old. It's ridiculous. But I went to Miami and I hung out with them one night. We went to this bar and we hung out in the back and we talked hardcore for 3 hours. And these kids know it all. They are like gurus of 90s hardcore, and they could sit there and talk to you about 90s hardcore better than you and I, and it will blow your mind.
And what you just said about that this place no longer does shows, not to sound like, you know, the wise Yoda or anything, but I've always told people, no matter what style of music you're in, but particularly hardcore, if you've got a club and you like going to it and shows are going, go to every one, because you all know in hardcore, you're on borrowed time.
Oh, absolutely.
It just is. Like, even if it's years, someone will sell the place, the next owner doesn't want something like that, or, you know, if you remember, I don't know if you knew the end of what brought CC's down, but I mean, we're talking like 99, 2000, and the area was getting scared of, quote, people coming in from New York with tattoos and body piercings. And
I remember.
There's gang warfare going on. Yet in Scranton, they have tinks where there's 50 on 50 meathead fights left and right, but they were scared of us because we look different, which is basically normal now. You know,
the older people were really like, it threw them off to see kids like, you know, in their late teens, early 20s with like big loop earrings and like covered in tats. And like, it really scared the fuck out of like I guess you could call it the baby boomer generation. And it was like, you think about it now, like, it's just like everything's even going crazier. But it's like back then, like, you know, people, hell, man, like we all dress different. We look different. You know, we stood out to those people. But when we got to CC's, we were all one big family, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So it sucks because I guess just one big misunderstanding is the best way to say it.
It's just, in a way too, it's like you almost say the internet caught the world up, like especially the Midwest, like everybody, had a big thing. The Midwest is all super hicky and stuff. Like, yeah, no, everybody kind of got modern and stuff. Like, could you really go to a town anymore where no one has tattoos at all? You know, like,
yeah, no, at all.
No, at all. It doesn't even exist. And when you were at CC's and you were young, did you? I know you were straight edge and stuff, but did you go into the bar area and sit at the bar, even fully just because they served anyone up there? Just to say,
yeah, it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. That place was a really funny place. It's just funny to think how young I was going there. You know, I have my son who just walking past me in the background. He's 15, and he could have got served there. I mean, you know, here he is, and he wouldn't even believe me if I told him.
Do you remember how they found out what your age was? Do you remember the saying they asked you?
I don't, but if you say it, I'll remember.
They pointed at you and go, "You 21?" Just say yes, and then they stamped your hand.
Okay. That's funny.
I never saw them look at an ID once. It was an honor code. Are you 21?
Yeah. I never understood that, but hey, I guess we know why they're not open anymore.
Yeah. But would you say I guess to wrap this up, what did you get out of all this? What did you get out of hardcore?
Oh man, that's what I still get out of hardcore. It's, it's what I turn to when things get stressful. It's the people I can rely on in tough times, and people, some of the people even in different bands, bands that were very influential on us. And I'm not going to drop names, but people that we respected back then that turned into like went from like mentors to brothers to me. And there's people now that I stay connected to that I'm just like, it's crazy to think to me. Like I said, I grew up listening to this guy, and now he's like one of my best friends, and it's like, but I turned to hardcore for the best and the worst times of my life, and all the good stuff in between, and people see when I talk to them about it how much I love it. I think what you put into hardcore is what you get out, not to be cliche, but only in the sense that if you really do a deep dive, even today, into like the newer hardcore, and you see these crowds and the stage dives and how passionate people are about it, like, it's crazy for me to, emulate that into words, to say like, it's special, man. Like, it will never grow old to me. I will never wake up and be tired of it. Every day and every time I listen to it, you can put on a song I've heard a million times in the car, and I don't think I'll ever get sick of it. And it's just something that's way beyond music to me. It's passion over fashion. It's all that good stuff. It's an art lost, and it is getting more popular. Bands like Turnstile, it's getting a little more mainstream, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay. Hardcore has always had its moments in history of having these like reaches of mainstream, but it's always going to remain where it is. And I think people need to relax and just enjoy the music. There's so many good new bands out. It's just, I don't even want to talk about old band because there's so much good new music out, and it's just, I'm enjoying every minute of it. And a lot of these bands are influenced by a lot of the 90s bands that you and I grew up around and with. And it's really cool, man. It's really cool to hear newer versions of influenced by bands like that, and I can go into all the bands, but I'm talking about, bands from the 90s, One King Down, All Out War, all the New York hardcore bands, all the Pennsylvania hardcore bands, the tri-state area in general, and I'll include Connecticut in that as well. We were just one big scene, man. We were northern hardcore, northeastern hardcore, I guess, and it was like, Lauren, I would see you at CB's or Wetlands hanging out just as much as I would see you in Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
I would go to shows in Pennsylvania, VFW halls, like on a Friday night where I wasn't doing anything. And I think that's the coolest part. Like, we didn't have to like connect, but we could see each other at shows and give that hug, and that, that friendship was always there. And it's cool. The friendship's still there today. You and I talk, it's like we didn't see each other since yesterday,
Yep. And there were great times. And you could also say it was shows were cheaper, and gas certainly was like 88 cents and 95 cents. So it wasn't hard to like everybody throw in $5. Let's go do this. Let's take the road trip.
So cool, man. I miss that, and that's why we have a tour coming up, and I'm just like, it's crazy. It's crazy to think I'm going to be road tripping with the guys again. It's really, really blows my mind.
Yeah. Tell us about the tour.
We leave on we fly out on my birthday, September 29th, and I'll be 43. And we first show's in London. We're going to play Ready Fest, Ready Eye Fest. It's a really, really cool festival put on by a group of guys in London. Shout out to Knuckle Dust. Shout out to all the bands part of that crew. I mean, these guys have looked out for us for so many years, and they booked this festival. Strife headlined it a few years ago before the pandemic. We're headlining it this year. Karma is playing from Chicago. I'm really excited to play with that band. There's a lot of cool bands from the UK playing, and it's going to be awesome, man. I'm really, really looking forward. So that's the first show. We're touring October 1st to the 10th in Europe, and we're playing 10 shows in 10 days in 8 countries. And one day, the day after London, this is where it gets crazy. It's the first time I'm ever doing this. We're playing 2 countries in one day. We have a matinee in Holland and a night show in Belgium. And that's going to be pretty cool. 2 sets in one day. And, we go to France, we go to Czech Republic, we go to Germany. I don't know which countries I'm forgetting. I always get in Europe. It's always a blur to me. It's one big trip, but it's crazy to think like all these places are just 3-4 hours apart. So when you're playing in Europe, you're touring. We're playing Switzerland, but it's very, very exciting for us. We always did well in Europe. It was the 25-year anniversary tour based on the fact that we started in 1995. Well, do the math. The pandemic happened, so it's a 27-year anniversary tour. We were supposed to go in 2020. So they revamped the posters from 25 to 27, but we have new music to play. So it's not just like we're playing old, songs. And of course, we love playing those old songs, but we're going out there on a mission. We're kind of like, ready to put a new album out next year, got new music, and the songs are incredible. Dion's been writing them, and we've been tracking them in the studio. Jerry Farley is actually going to produce the record, who just produced the last 3 Sick of It All records and Lamb of God's record, and he's just doing Fall Out Boy and Vision of Disorder. He was actually a friend that we used to take him to CC's. If you remember the guy with the dreadlocks who kind of looked like Tim from VOD, real skinny, and he used to wear raver kind of clothes, that was Jerry Farley. That was our buddy. Well, it turns out he turned into a big time engineer and now producer in the studio. So life comes full circle, and he's gonna help us with the record. Shout out to Jerry Farley. And yeah, man, it's good times ahead. All love, all positive stuff. Growing the family, growing the band, trying to see if we can take one last hack at it and, hit the road a little bit next year, go back to Europe, play some Northeastern shows, get to the West Coast. I mean, kind of like what you see some other bands doing. We're starting to do it too, and it's exciting.
That's great. And the only thing I think could, even though it was kind of more of a fun and 90s thing, but at times you just go out of your mind. You got GPS now.
We don't have
driving to some of these places like in the middle of nowhere, and you
say that
you would stop at like a convenience store and be like, "You know where this fire hall is?" And they looked at you with like 3 heads, and you're just like, "Find me a kid with a backpack to show me." That's all
I could tell you. We, going to Pennsylvania and going to Albany and Syracuse, always this happened. Like we wound up in some random place because we didn't have directions. And I remember being with Irate and Shutdown and Irate. We took a van together and we had some shows in Albany and Syracuse and Buffalo. Maybe we did a weekend together, and we couldn't find the place. And we wound up stopping at some place, and it was like a restaurant with no name on it. And we walk in, and it's like this, it's like out of a horror movie. And somebody walks up to us, and they're like, "Do you want the red plate or the blue plate special?" And we're like, "We're just trying to find directions to the club." And man, it's the stuff nightmares are made of. Thank God for GPS now.
Oh wow, it's crazy. And it was nuts back then because you could also, in the 90s at least, people didn't exactly dress like us. If you saw someone with like a floor punch shirt on in another state, you could go up and start talking to that person.
Oh, easily. Yeah, for sure.
Now it's a little bit more like, I'm not sure. Like, did you buy that shirt online? It was kind of like an inside club. And you'll like this one. I remember I was with some of my band members, my short-lived band, Final Stand, and we stopped at a Burger King in Dixon City. By the way, I don't eat that stuff anymore. But I remember looking over. Yeah, I remember we were looking over, and we saw people, dressed like us, the big pants and some New York hardcore shirts on, and I'm like, there's somebody like that. That's a band. And like I was like, we don't know who it is, but we were like, why don't you go find out? And I went over, and I was like, you guys are a band. They're like, yeah. And I'm like, I know you're a hardcore band. I'm sorry, I just don't know who you are off band. Who are you? And they go, we're Inhuman.
That's so funny.
I was like, oh shit, dude. I hope I didn't miss your show today. If you're this is why you're in the area. I was like, I just saw you guys at Man of Screen. They go, oh no, we're passing through. We're on our way to Albany. We were just hungry. So
that is so funny.
That's really funny. Yeah. So I mean, we just had a quick chat about shows, but they were eating.
Oh,
fast.
They're great guys. Yeah,
we were eating fast, but I just said like there was a time when you could just identify. You could like literally look at it. That's one of my kind.
It's funny you say that because like I try to identify with like some of the younger kids. Like I want them to know that like I'm supportive of their bands, and I hate to say younger kids. Some of them are men. You know what I'm saying? But they're just younger than us. They're like 20 years younger than us. And it's like funny, like I'll hit them up if I'm into their band and I'll be like, dude, I just want you to know, like your band rules. I'm a big fan. Keep doing your thing. Great to see you guys out there hustling, doing your thing. And it's cool. Like I'm doing the same thing I did 25 years ago. Like this is how I make friends. So I kind of, I like to meet younger kids. When I say younger, just younger than you and I in bands and just doing it. And I can relate to them on so many levels that it's like I just want to listen to them and know that they have my support. You know what I mean? And whether it means anything to them, I couldn't tell you, but it's just cool, man. There's so much good stuff out there.
I think that's good to say to any band because being in a band that at any point that those negative vibes could come. If you're up against the wall, should we quit? Blah blah blah. And I think sometimes little conversations like that keep people going.
Absolutely, absolutely, man.
You might flash back to that to be like, no, what? No, we got to keep this going. So
Yeah, man. And like I said, they may not have been fans of Shutdown per se or whatever, but I just think it's cool for an older hardcore guy to let a younger hardcore guy know, yo, you guys are doing your thing and much respect. My message to them is much respect. Great to see younger bands doing their thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at. There's a couple of really good bands from New York doing their thing now. Combust is dope. I love that band. Shout out to Combust. Pick up their new record. Really good hardcore band, man. I mean, it's kind of like modern day influenced by like Killing Time and Integrity. It's really cool stuff. The guys in Shutdown have a band called The Last Stand. They're really good. Check them out. Their new music is really good. They put an EP out during the pandemic. That's great. They did a split with a band from California that we're friends with called One Choice that actually played Black and Blue Bowl. Okay. There's so many other things coming. Like there's a band from Baltimore called End It that I absolutely love. They're one of my favorite bands. And there's just so much good new music out, man. Mind Force, of course, is just, to me, they're I think for New York hardcore, Mind Force takes the reins right now. I mean, they may be the biggest New York hardcore band right now in the world. They're that good and they deserve it. They're a great band. Great to see that band getting out there. Again, I looked up the Sound and Fury set from them and I was just like blown away. I mean, just blown away. And it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen if you look it up. It's just crowd, intensity, passion, everything you want out of a hardcore show.
Sweet. I'm definitely going to look that up at some point after we're done here. But I'm also heading to a show, and I'm proud to announce to the hardcore scene from around the world that a little later, for the second time, I'm going to go see Tim Capello play. And if for anyone who doesn't know who Tim Capello is the saxophone player from the movie The Lost Boys. So that's how cool I am.
That's super cool, man. That's super cool. I've always wanted to go to the Lost Boys house. It's in Oklahoma, and like everybody talks about it.
You mean the Outsiders?
The Outsiders. I was thinking of the Outsiders. Sorry about that.
I said the Lost Boys. I was actually at the Outsider house. It's owned by I think it's one of the guys from Cypress Hill or House
something like that. Yeah, I see everybody put pictures there. But yes, the Lost Boys. I always get Lost Boys and Outsiders confused. Lost Boys was an adult movie. My brother Mike was really.
I've been at both spots, so that's pretty freaking cool. But
nice, man.
But Mark, where could anyone hear Shutdown right now?
So you can go on Spotify. We're on Spotify. We're on Pandora. As we release new music next year, we're kind of like figuring out who's going to put it out, but it'll be out there on all platforms. But if you do want to support us, just go. You can follow me on Instagram, Mark Shutdown on Instagram. You can follow Shutdown's Facebook page. We're pretty active on there, and I'm going to start a Shutdown Instagram page soon too, so you can be on the lookout for that. But you can check out all our albums and stuff, with the exception of the SFT Turning the Tide EP, which is not on any digital platforms. I'm trying to change that. I'm working with Kevin Gill to try to get that changed. So that should be out there hopefully. But all 3 releases from Victory are on, all the digital platforms. Looking forward to just continuing to do this hardcore thing, man. It's gonna be doing it for as long as I can because it's really what we love. And my wife says it the best way. She said, when you're up there playing with your guys, like with the Shutdown guys, like you're glowing. She said, you're glowing up there. Like you want to be there. Like this is what you love. And everybody kind of has that passion. For me, it's playing and listening to hardcore.
Wait. Well, Mark, we're still young guys, but 27 years went by pretty fast, my friend.
It really did, dude. It really did, Lauren. But let me tell you, you look great, man. You look the same. It's great to see like you doing your thing. I'm not crazy active on social media, but I'm active enough to have seen your growth over the last like 10 to 15 years. We were friends since this thing Facebook came out, and like to see the growth of yourself and your career, and it's really cool, man. Kudos to you. Keep doing it. It's really cool. I'm just one of those guys that gets to say I knew you back when. And that's kind of how I tell it to my kids, and there's a lot of people like that in my life from back in the day when we were all friends, and we're still here, right? And we're still kicking it. We're still strong, and You know, that's kind of, I believe that the hardcore has a big part of that for both of us. It keeps us mentally strong and healthy and, you know, doing good things in our life, as weird as that sounds.
And I always said, dude, it keeps you young, dude. I mean, you don't want to let the old man in. Be a responsible adult, but don't let the old man in ever.
You know, I let the grouchy old man in with 4 kids all the time. You know what I mean? But then I cook and I put on, you know, Keepers of the Faith, and I remember who I am. And I call one of them downstairs and we start moshing.
Yeah, I hear you, brother. Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, brother.
And I thank this audience for taking the time to check out this show. Again, please give us that subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio. Mark, I thank you again. And
thanks, man. Lauren, you're awesome, dude. I appreciate you having me on. After all these years, it was a pleasure. Hope you continue to do your thing. I'm always here. You got my full support. And again, I appreciate it, man. It's always fun. I've been sitting in my kids' room. They've been listening to this whole podcast. I think I'm boring the hell out of them. Let's see. So a lot of people are going to look at the background and go, "Oh, I didn't know he was an Attack of the Titans fan." But you know, but no, it's all good, man. I really appreciate you having me. You know, I love talking about this stuff just like you do, and happy to be here. So thanks, bro, and stay in touch.
You got it, bro. I'll shut the party down.
Later, man. Appreciate you.
Later.